Hey everybody, it's Mark Schultz and Larry Little here for another episode of LinkedIn Live Recovery in Aviation. Good morning, Larry.
Hey Mark, good to be with you again on our continuing series of recovery in aviation. Excited to have a discussion this morning.
Yep, and on this program, we're interviewing leaders in the industry to bring you good, positive news about how we can accelerate recovery in aviation. Hey, hang tight with us today and join us in this live broadcast. We got a great guest with exciting new technology here we want to share with you. And so just as we get started here, I wanted to tell you that this is a live program. And so you are actually going to have the opportunity to be able to comment and to ask questions. And so if you have questions during the broadcast today, put them into the comments. And we actually see them here in our studio. And we will be answering questions live with our guest, which I'll introduce in a minute. And I also wanted to ask you if you could continue to help us to get this positive message out and just share this broadcast. If you help share this broadcast, it helps get our message out, and other people will be able to join us as well. So we are really excited about having this with you today. Hey, Larry, we're seeing a lot of uptick of activity in the industry today out there, aren't we?
You know, Mark, it's really refreshing that every day we see more and more news about airlines figuring out how to fly people safely and maintain their health. And you know, it's the innovative ideas every day are just, you know, it's just really exciting to see and encouraging.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And so that's why we want to be bringing this positive program, which gives you specifically ideas on how you can accelerate the recovery in your business and help around the industry for us to be able to move forward faster. Now, today we're going to be talking about what's happening out there today. We're going to be talking about how it's affecting companies and what you can specifically do in order to be able to accelerate progress in your industry. So let me, without any further discussion, let's bring our special guest in today, and it's Klaus Sonnenleiter from the company Luftronix. Good morning, Klaus. How are you?
Morning, Mark. Morning, Larry. Good. How are you?
Excellent. Excellent. Hey, Klaus. So where are you located today?
In New Jersey.
Excellent. All right. Okay. Very good. Very good. And, you know, before we kind of get started, I just want for people to know who you are and what this company Luftronix is. We'll get into that in more detail later. But Klaus is the CEO of Luftronix. And what is Luftronix? What company is that?
So we make scanning equipment for commercial aircraft, and we collect the data for an inspection via drone and then display it on an inspection terminal.
Very nice. Very nice. Hey, in one of our exchanges of emails getting ready for this program, you told me you kind of had a tagline and what your specialty was. What is that?
I had to remember it first, what I had told you. Precision matters, and we got it covered.
Precision matters, right? Yeah, and that caught my attention because, you know, in the airline industry, quality and precision and accuracy are so important. And so, you know, we're going to talk about their scanning and some of their new drone technology and really what's happening. But hey, as we kind of get started, you know, you said you're out in New Jersey, and you know, in the United States, it's been such a big impact on the East Coast with this coronavirus. And I like to help people to get firsthand information about what's going on around the world. I have international guests and, you know, people from the U.S. and all over, and I like to give people firsthand information. Can you kind of tell us what's happening on the East Coast right now with respect to the coronavirus?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the situation seems to be slowly improving in both New Jersey and New York. I mean, the two governors are on the news every day, but it looks like it is really slowly picking up. Things are opening up again. So cautiously optimistic is probably the best way to describe everything.
Okay. All right. Hey, Larry, I know that you follow that pretty closely. I mean, on the news and stuff. And what are you getting off the news?
Well, I think Klaus said it. It's really refreshing to see the region, that Northeast region, work together. You know, the governors from New York and from New Jersey and in Pennsylvania and Vermont and Massachusetts, all working together to come up with a solution. And it's really similar to what we've talked about on this show over and over. It's about how do we get leaders to work together to solve the problem. It's refreshing to see government do that, but it's applicable to what we're talking about today as well.
Yeah. Yep. Hey, Klaus, how is it affecting the people out there on the East Coast?
Well, it's the same as everywhere, I would say, and being prevented from doing stuff is never a good thing. And there were some cases where people thought people were overreaching, not being able to go to parks and stuff like that, but that's all over now, so it's all getting better.
Yeah, that's the important part, because we are definitely seeing a downward trend, in the infections and all the bad news, and that's why we're really focusing on what's happening now. Because as Larry and I started to say at the beginning of the program, we are seeing a real increase in activity, in the industry right now, and we are definitely seeing some changes. And we're seeing airlines announcing that they're going to be doing flying, and a lot of really interesting activity in the news. Larry, you are a guy who likes statistics and data, and there's this chart that someone sent me from the Boston Consulting Group, which was really addressing that. And Larry, what are you seeing happening out there with flying right now today?
Well, Mark, you mentioned it. I think people are starting to fly again, and the facts and the data sort of reflect that. I read this morning that Southwest was predicting in May load factors of around 5 or 10%. Their load factors are actually 25 to 30%, which is significantly higher. And I think people are starting to feel comfortable with what the airlines and the airports are doing to make the whole experience safe.
Yeah, and you know what? This chart I saw from the Boston Consulting Group, a friend at Dassault in Russia sent this to me. So people are looking at this all around the world. And the interesting thing is that blue line across the top actually shows the decrease in travel since the beginning of the year. But in the last month here, you can see that we're starting to see an increase in travel that's occurring, which is really great news. And so we are definitely seeing airlines talking about opening new routes and reopening their existing routes and starting to do new flying in the June-July timeframe. And so I think our discussions about recovery are very, very timely, because we need to be readying ourselves to be able to accelerate what we're doing and to step up to the increase that's coming, in front of us right now. I mean, what are the two, Klaus, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting time, because I don't think anybody has ever seen that many aircraft on the ground. That has never existed, and I think somebody recently said it's almost like starting a new airline, which is true. Yeah. Except when you start a new airline, you get fresh aircraft delivered. In this case, you got to reactivate them from storage, which is much harder. Yeah,
no question about that. We are seeing a lot of aircraft that are on the ground. Larry and I have talked about this, and there's some pictures that we have here that we're showing of airlines and different aircraft that are basically sitting on the ground. And boy, it's going to take a lot to get those airplanes out of storage. Larry, you came from Boeing. For those of you that know, and Boeing has storage procedures just like every other operator does. Larry, what does it take to get an airplane out of storage and get it back into service again?
Well, hey, Mark, I was going to make a couple of comments. I think there's, getting those airplanes back in service is really important. And there's our standard procedures about, how to store the airplane, and then how to get it back out of storage, and how to make sure it's compliant with all the regulations. And I think that's one thing that Klaus brings to the table is that compliance view. The other thing I was going to mention is, some of those airplanes are never going to come back into service. And thank God we don't have to fly on an MD-80 or MD-90 anymore. There's some good things about this as well.
Yeah, I know. I've been in some pretty old ratty, MD-80s or, MD-90, things like that. Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. Klaus, given that we have all these airplanes that are on the ground and they're going to have to be returned to service, I mean, there's different procedures that have to bring them out, like different inspections that occur and different activities that are needed to be able to return the aircraft to service. Now, I know specifically that you have some ideas on how that can potentially be improved or be accelerated, and your company focuses on that. Some.
Yeah. Certainly, yeah. I mean, what the main thing we do is speed up the inspection process by enabling people to collect the data more quickly. That's the number one thing. And if you have a massive pipeline of aircraft that need to come back, then the main assignment is to figure out how to quickly get a status on the aircraft and how to certify that they are good to fly. And we can help speed that up.
Yeah, Klaus, in some of our early discussions, you were telling me a bit about there have been some regulatory adjustments or changes having to do with visual inspections, and then the use of drone technology. How has that changed? What is the regulations say about doing that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we can really call it adjustments. I think the right term is clarifications.
Oh, okay.
And it came up in the context of so many people being trying to work from remote. And the one thing the FAA has done recently is sent out a clarification of how to, what they mean by allowing people to do remote inspections, collecting images mechanically with a camera. And it is precisely what we do. And we actually go one step further. We use a camera where we guarantee not just the image quality that we collect, but also the exact distance from the aircraft and the exact, people call it GSD, a ground sampling distance, meaning we know exactly how far each pixel is from each other, and we can measure artifacts on the surface digitally.
Klaus, this is just really cool. And I've kind of been in the space for a while, and we've tried to do these remote inspections, and to see that you guys are really bringing it into production with standard processes, and and being able to maybe share what the drone is seeing with someone in maintenance control. You're really making it happen, and especially with all these airplanes that need to come back into service and be inspected. Really amazing application of the technology.
Klaus, we have some. Let me remind our viewers here today. We have a lot of people really online. I'm looking at it right now from all around the world right now, actually. And we have Klaus here, who's the CEO of this company, and I know that people are really interested in a lot of different ideas around drone and measurement and precision measurement technology. And so you have an opportunity to jump in and ask some questions. And so I'm going to ask him some questions about this technology. But if you have some specific questions or ideas, throw them in the comments here, because this is a great opportunity for you to reach out to someone who's running this company. But Klaus, we're seeing some really interesting things on this video here. I'm seeing some drones flying around, some cameras and lights flashing, and some software. Can you do a sort of a walkthrough on what's happening here? What's going on in this video that we were watching here?
Sure. What you're seeing there is one of our inspection flights at our testing facility in Kiev, actually, where we cooperate with the National Aviation University, and the drone that you see doing the inspection right here is on a pre-configured autonomous path, so it doesn't get the navigation is done by the drone itself. Nobody is guiding it, and the drone collects images that are taken from the surface piece by piece, so that it can be stitched together afterwards as a complete map of the entire surface. The lighting that you see is short flashes to make sure that we have consistent lighting for the surface, and can have the images taken in exactly the same way every time, regardless of time of day, whether there is sunlight or whether it's taken at night. It doesn't really matter. And therefore, we can compare images from one inspection run to the next. So if we have repeated scans of an aircraft, you can compare the images, and you can be sure that they are being taken in exactly the same way.
Klaus, at Boeing, we had a similar application, but I think what the drone really brings to it, as you said, is precision. You're able to kind of map the airplane, and then able to look at it again and see any places that might have damage or repairs kind of real time. And I think that's the next step that was really needed.
Yeah. So Klaus, is that let's talk a little bit about the business application and what this can kind of do for things. So I see, 2 or 3 major, of course, many of them, but 2 or 3 major business applications that might help during the time of recovery. Here we have airplanes that are on the ground that need inspection. Let's talk about the business of that. So what can technology like this do to help accelerate inspection?
So number one, it aids in the data collection process, because the biggest obstacle in getting an inspection done quickly is providing access. Getting to all the points that need to be inspected, especially if it's a full inspection, because, for example, after a lightning strike or a similar incident, it takes between 6 and 12 hours, depending on the size of the aircraft, to get it fully inspected. And most of that time is spent getting to the places that we need to take a look at. So with the drone, we can cut that time down to under an hour for the data collection. Of course, we still need to look at the pictures and make a decision. However, if we can look at them in a straight line, rather than having to climb, look, climb back down, move the ladder, climb up again, it goes a whole lot faster. That's the number one thing that that this changes.
Okay, so definitely efficiencies in the area of labor and manpower. That's great, and setup time, things like that. That's great. And so, as far as precision is concerned, do you find there's greater opportunity for documentation, or what would the benefit be in that area?
So you mean with precision in how we annotate the images?
Yeah, right. Documenting of the repairs. I mean, is that doing it digitally? Is that an advantage?
I think so. I mean, in general, I have to say the whole industry is rather poorly digitized. However, this gives us an opportunity to come in with images that are location annotated. It means we know where to find the actual artifact, and we have a way of guaranteeing that what you see on screen can be measured, and you can make a decision on screen. In other words, if you see an artifact, a lightning strike, burn mark, or something like that, or a flare, you can measure it with a measuring tool, and you know it is 3 millimeters, 8 millimeters, or 15 millimeters, and you know that for sure, without having to climb on top of the aircraft for it. And that's really important. And if you store it, digitize it, and then keep archives so that you can come back later and compare whether something has grown. If we talk about some scratch or a suspected scratch, which might be a crack, if you come back later and say, okay, it has grown, then you got an emergency on your hand. If it hasn't grown, then you know it's stable and you don't need to worry as much. So all these things can be done once you're digitized. It cannot be done if you're not digitized.
Is all of this information streaming off live, or are they static pictures, or what? What's happening here?
So we do both, and the reason is bandwidth, because this is a massive amount of data if you collect it in raw format, and if you collect it at the right resolution, and then you're accumulating a lot of data, and we do. So therefore, you can't send the raw data in real time to the inspector who's watching this on screen. But however, we enable that method of working as well by sending a low resolution version onto the monitoring screen, so that somebody who's watching the progress of the drone can watch live in real time. And if there is something that they spot immediately and say, oh, we need to stick around, you can manually intercept. You can make the drone do a closer inspection, and whatever your strategy is. But most importantly, the full data set is carried by the drone, and we carry it on an SSD that can be plugged right into the inspection station after the drone is done, for full analysis, where you can do all the measuring and you get all the accuracy that you need, which you don't get on the low-res images for obvious reasons.
Okay, all right. Hey, those of you who are watching today, you may not know that, Larry has a history, as I do, working with Boeing, but Larry ran the Toolbox organization at Boeing, and Toolbox provides aircraft documentation for Boeing. Now, Larry, I remember that there was a structures module that was part of that Toolbox, wasn't there?
Yeah, actually, we had created some 3D models of the airplane to be able to track structural damage to the airplane. But I think what the drone technology brings is just more fidelity of really what's going on with the airplane, and your ability to kind of have a better sense of spatial awareness of where the damage is on the airplane, and actually see a photograph of it. So that, to me, that's kind of, like I said, kind of taking the next step past static 3D models, if you will, to real-time photographs of what's going on with the airplane. And we're talking about getting the airplane back to service, like we're talking now, or a lease return. this could really streamline a lease return.
Yeah, and I remember that that application had the ability to model structural damage and repairs and produce dent and buckle reports. Of course, important for the history of the aircraft, but also during lease returns. And so, Klaus, maybe you could help me with this. Is that how could providing this kind of documentation feed into producing a digital twin or producing a documentation of a model, that might go into one of these record keeping programs to produce a dent and buckle report? I mean, how does all that tie together?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And we see a lot of integration need in that field because there are, of course, a lot of people who talk about digital twins. It's a hot topic these days, and everybody means a little bit of a different thing. However, what every digital twin needs, of course, is not just the as wanted information, like the design drawings. That's all nice to have, but what you need is the as is information. You need the updates. You need the what has changed to the object. Has it had an incident with a luggage cart that ran into its door, or has it had, how many lightning strikes did it have, and what did it leave in terms of burn marks? What's the status of the rivets? What does it look like with paint, without paint? Is there anything underneath that paint that was seen at the last when it was last stripped and all that? So if you collect all of this as a complete history of the plane, then the lease returns will be really simple because you just hand it over. You don't need to do a full check on everything for the aircraft like you have to do today. So that simplifies things. Of course, it creates an enormous data safekeeping effort, which is an interesting problem all in itself. And of course, this is all down the road. It's not for today. It's more like once we accumulate all the data and put it all together, that's when it becomes really interesting.
Yeah, I can definitely see the value in leveraging the data and the damages that are occurring and sending them off into a record keeping system to organize that, one, for maintaining the history of the aircraft, but two, for those lease returns. I've seen some pretty big liabilities that exist at the end when proper documentation isn't kept and record keeping when an aircraft has to go back. The financial liabilities are huge. Hey guys, I'm taking questions here.
Mark, let me just share one thing. I think you mentioned it. We were working with one airline, and they lost the records for its repair. So at lease return, they don't have the records for this repair that was done on the airplane. So they have to take the repair off. They have to put the new repair back, then do a new repair. They have to get that repair certified. The total cost of that was about $50,000, one repair. Wow. So that's, that kind of puts in context, if you have good records and good documentation of the as flying configuration from a structural standpoint, it's really valuable.
Yeah, the value of that is really significant. Klaus, I mean, I suppose that you guys have done some case studies and things. I suppose you're seeing other situations like that where there's opportunities to save.
Yeah, there's actually plenty. I mean, the one most obvious one is that the entire industry has, or not now, unfortunately, but when it's all up and running, the biggest headache is unscheduled inspections, and being able to quickly return the equipment into service is always an emergency, and that is where a lot of the pain is going, and we can help actually quite a lot with that pain. In addition, there's a lot of other stuff. Once you start thinking through the record keeping aspect and the digital twin promise, then you're in a game where you can automate a whole lot of other things as well in heavy maintenance as well as in line maintenance. And the only question then becomes, how fast can you introduce it, and how quickly can you consolidate all that record keeping in a uniform way? Because that is ultimately the big price, being able to consolidate all your records in the same way so that they're easily comparable, and you can compare records of an airplane in different stages at different times, with or without paint, and being able to make a quick judgment on what a certain artifact means and where it came from.
Yeah, there's so many opportunities for cost savings. there's just no question about it, in those areas. Hey, listen, I want to remind our viewers that we are taking questions. Klaus, I know that this is challenging sometimes when you have to answer questions on the fly, but we do have some questions, and I wanted to ask people out there, hey, put some comments in, and we'll take your questions live. Let me put one of them up there. Let's put this question up on the screen. There's a question here that says, is there already a best practice with regards to how inspectors are managing liability and insurance with drones?
That's an interesting question, yes. And not surprisingly, this is a brand new technology, brand new industry. And insurance companies are looking at this very carefully. We have seen a number of insurance companies who are willing to do this, and they have their act together in terms of what it means to have a drone flying versus other inspection equipment. So there is insurance for it. But again, it's a new field where a lot of insurance companies will tell you, oh, this is not something we're getting into it. So you're looking for really.
Well, can you tell us about the risks? I mean, you wouldn't do it if it wasn't safe, I presume. Tell us about the safety surrounding the situation. Sure.
Yeah, and that's actually a big part of what we're telling the insurance companies when it comes to that, how we guarantee that certain things can't happen, how we do obstacle avoidance, and how we have redundant systems for everything so that these drones can't just drop. Instead, we have safeguards for even if an autopilot breaks or if a motor fails, we have backups for everything. Navigation cameras failing, and even that we can survive by switching to different navigation methods, and always being, our philosophy is the number one thing that matters is always to be able to bring down the drone safely. And there are different stages of that by, first of all, looking at the failure at hand and qualifying it as something that is either something that requires an immediate landing or can hold still until an operator says what to do. So there's different fallback strategies for almost everything. And therefore, it's not like anybody would ever say a drone cannot fall out of the sky. Of course, that would be silly to say. There's always some residual risk, but we are working as hard as we can to make it as small as it could possibly be. And that story actually goes over well with insurance companies too.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, Larry and I are both pilots. Larry flies more now than what I do. Larry, do you ever see any drones flying around the airport?
Well, when I look at the airport and I look at the airspace around the airport, there's always a report of what's going on with drones. So, and I think that, the small airports that I fly into and out of, there are drones flying around, and whether it's a bird or a drone, you got to be aware of what's going on in the airspace.
Yeah. Now, Klaus, I asked that a little bit, kidding, because I wanted to know is that, do you fly your drones on the ramp, or do you fly them in the hangar, or what are the restrictions in that area?
So yeah, that actually is an interesting question, and a lot of people would like us to fly the drones on the ramp. However, everybody knows that airports are well-known no-fly zones for drones. So you can only fly at an airport with an exception from the FAA or EASA or whose jurisdiction you're in, and those exceptions are for a limited time window. You need to apply for them well ahead of time. So that method doesn't really work for routine inspections. So currently we're flying in the hangar, and of course we've been hearing from all the regulators what they think their path is to a inspection drone flying elsewhere on the airport. And the answer is almost always the same. It is prove to us that you're flying fine in the hangar. Once we've seen that for a while, we may let you come out of the hangar and you can fly with an airplane around an airplane that's parked behind the hangar. If you've shown us that you're not escaping from that fenced-in area that you've created for yourselves, then you can move a little bit closer to the area where you really want to be, and maybe in 5 years you can fly at the gate.
Okay, maybe.
That's sort of the timeline.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Mark, I got a quick question. Hey, Klaus, what you're showing there is just really cool. How close are you to in full production of what we're seeing?
I'm sorry.
How close are you to full production of the system?
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're ready for full production. When this whole crisis started, we were actually planning our first official POC with plans for rollouts and all that. Now, of course, the world has changed a little bit. However, the interesting part of that is that we've heard from a lot of people who are saying, yeah, we're using that time. We're making plans now. We're looking around what to do.
Cool, cool.
Yeah. Hey, we have some more questions coming in. Let's put another question up. So there's kind of a comment in the question, and I'll just read it here. And Klaus, if you could help us with this. So make a digital clone at birth and at every base maintenance visit. Use the Delta for multi-purpose and for warranty and leaks and damage and dent and buckle charts. If accurate enough, could it see flight controls out of rigging and aerodynamic smoothness and seals and panels in order to measure fuel efficiency? So what's the accuracy of it, and can you use it to measure, damage on flight control surfaces, or, could they actually use that to calculate, drag? Or, I think the question is that how accurate is it? What can I use it for?
Yeah. So you'd have to combine it with other stuff. And number one problem you'll run into if you want to use it for this problem as described is we do two-dimensional mapping and looking for two-dimensional artifacts. We see dents, but we cannot measure dents. So therefore, the whole aerodynamics effect we can't really calculate with our method alone. So you would need to combine it with something like an A3 or some similar tool that allows you to measure the dent precisely so that you can calculate the effect on aerodynamics. That's one aspect. And then the other is in order to make the entire thing work. Let me read this again real quick. Because it's a long one. So yeah, a lot of the other stuff I think you can do with our system as is, but calculating fuel efficiency, I think there are known ways of doing it. I know Pace is doing good work in that field, and they have calculations for that. So you would probably want to combine the tools that you already have with ours and use them in combination and stick them together. That would be an really interesting project.
Yeah, it really is. I think definitely from what you're telling us is that it would have the, precision to find damage and things on control surfaces or areas like that. No question. Part one of the answer. Part two is, could you extend that, to other applications? And, that's an interesting thought is that I know when I was at Boeing, we did some fuel efficiency studies, and you'd look at, the characteristics of one aircraft versus another. And so if you understood an aircraft and the drag coefficients and things like that, I suppose you could run those things together. It's an interesting thought. Maybe one day we'll do a show on fuel efficiency, maybe.
Yeah, no, it's exactly right. I mean, looking for artifacts of damage was, of course, our primary mission, but it doesn't mean we live in isolation. I mean, all these things that people use around aircraft, they do need to get better integrated, and that's an interesting path to go. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Well, hey, I want to kind of bring this back down to the funnel of what we started. We started out really broad by saying, hey, what's happening in the industry? And, we're seeing some movement and improvement. We've talked about some interesting technologies and how they potentially could, accelerate that or create some efficiencies. And so, guys, let's kind of sum up the things that we said here. We said, hey, you could create efficiencies by improving, manpower and labor. We said that you could maybe create better documentation and records through dent and buckle reports and better structural record keeping, capturing. There's, of course, setup time that could be reduced. And so I think maybe a combination of what you've been telling us here this morning is that, there may be efficiencies that can be created to get the fleet back faster by being able to do inspection. And then there may be efficiencies that come from better record keeping and keeping track of the damage on an aircraft, making it easier to be able to produce reports and maybe be able to reduce cost when returning aircraft back to like a leaseholder and things like that. So, guys, are there any other thoughts you have on some of the efficiencies that come from using this kind of technology?
So Klaus, let me jump in here, and then you can kind of wrap us up. From my standpoint, we've talked about this technology and kind of understood the value chain for a long time. To see it actually come into production, that's kind of why I asked, is really exciting, because you solved a lot of problems to bring this to production. I think we understand the value and the efficiency. but to see it actually come into production.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think there is a lot of efficiency to be gained in routine work, as well as in new things that currently cannot be done. And it's not so much about saving labor cost. I haven't talked to a single airline or MRO who said they're trying to save labor costs. They all pointed out very quickly that the main cost factor is actually not labor. It's the delays. It's the inability to use the equipment when it was scheduled to be used.
Yeah.
Sounds ironic in these times, but that really was the biggest headache they had at the time, and will have again very soon, of course.
Yeah, when you have an airplane sitting at the gate and it can't go, that's definitely a problem.
Yes, exactly. That is the number one thing that is creating the efficiency.
Hey, let's take another question here. There's another question that came in that I thought was pretty interesting. I'm going to read it real quick. Is that considering the different configurations of aircraft, wingtips, antenna positions, how much efforts are the setup, and everything that needs to be done to run the scan? So, you said earlier that it was programmed for an aircraft. Is that, given the complexity of an aircraft, how difficult is it to set up, a flight path?
So that's actually very interesting, and we've spent a lot of effort making sure that our scan plans, as we call them, are agnostic of any of the modifications that people tend to make on the aircraft. So whether you have wingtips or not, whether you have the antenna in a certain place or not, or have it elsewhere, if you have 3 antennas for all we care, really doesn't matter. We scan the airplane as is, not as we expect it to be. And that's a very important piece, because based on what we hear out of the industry, even if you compare 2 737 NGs or 2 321neos, they're always a little different. There's stuff that has been done to them. There's something that has been mounted in an unusual place. You cannot rely on everything being exactly the way it is in the standard model as Airbus or Boeing will ship them. So therefore, we've early on made a decision we need to be agnostic of that, and we make our scan plans specific to an aircraft type, but completely agnostic to what that type looks like. We can scan it even with panels off, things removed and stuff. We don't care. We just execute the scan plan, check what's there, and we report on it. That's it.
So Klaus, does the drone run by a scan plan, or does it have collision avoidance in it? I mean, how does it keep it from running into the airplane? I mean,
both. I mean, the scan plan is configured so that it stays at a 2.5 to 3 meter distance off the drone, off the aircraft surface. So that's standard. And in terms of collision avoidance, we look for any unexpected object in our flight path or around the drone, rather. So if we find one, we stay away from it. There's a setting you can configure it. I think it's by standard, it's set to 1 meter and 70 centimeters that we want to stay away from any object in the room. So if we get closer than that, we stop and wait for instructions. It could be that the object gets removed and the drone continues, or it could be that somebody says we need to stop right here because somebody drove a truck next to the aircraft and we can't continue. Then we land and we fix the problem and then we continue. So the standard plan is anchored to the aircraft coordinate system and therefore is safe to execute around the aircraft. But imagine the case where somebody puts a ladder up against the aircraft while we're flying the drone on one side and they come from the other side and they want to fix some stuff, and then we come around and we bump into the ladder. So we won't bump into it. We stop 1 meter and 70 centimeters away from it.
Okay, yeah. There's so much opportunity with the advancement of technology. It's really exciting to see what you're doing and really where things are going. So, hey, as we kind of wrap up the discussions on technology, you're also the CEO of that company, and I really like putting leaders in front of people on this program because I think enthusiasm from leaders and thought leadership is really important. And if I were to ask you some questions, is that in these difficult times when people are thinking about how do they improve, or how do they accelerate? I mean, do you have any particular advice for people in their business on what they can be doing to be able to survive, not just survive, but to thrive and accelerate?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because in a time of crisis is always also a time where the deck of cards get reshuffled, and where all of a sudden you find people who come out ahead that you didn't expect, where previously you would have said, all right, we know all the big players, and now all of a sudden there's a new one. And the reason why that happens is because certain people have better focus. They watch exactly what they need to watch. They develop tunnel vision, and they are hell-bent on finding the other side, and they do find it. That's really important. And at the same time, people who successfully navigate that have two additional properties. Usually they know about efficiency. They know how to make sure that they put their resources to the best use, and they find openings and opportunities. When they see an opportunity where they can create something that's better than their competitors' lineup, they take it, they run with it, and when the crisis is over, everybody says, where did they come from?
Yeah. So, Klaus, I think I heard you say focus and be more efficient. Is that what I heard you say?
Absolutely. And look for opportunities.
And look for opportunities. Focus, be more efficient, and look for new opportunities in this new world we're in. Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, Larry, any final thoughts as we're wrapping things up today?
I don't think so, Mark. I think that was a really good discussion.
Very good. Awesome. Great. Hey, listen, we try to bring these broadcasts to you 1, 2, or 3 times a week, and we're really focused on recovery in aviation, because I really believe that as leaders in the industry, that we have the opportunity with great enthusiasm to be able to drive and accelerate recovery really in the industry. And so, it's up to us as leaders to accelerate the activities in this industry. And as what Klaus just said, is that look for new opportunities, be more efficient, and focus. All right. And Klaus, if people want to continue this conversation with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Easiest way is by email, or you find me on LinkedIn. Either way works.
Okay. So your email address, we have it flat. Well, first of all, LinkedIn, we have your name and title flashed up on the screen there right now. So if someone wants to get in touch with Klaus on LinkedIn, it's Klaus Sonnenleiter, and there's the spelling on the screen. And then also we have a copy of your email address here. If people want to reach out to you, it's klaus@luftronix.com. Is that correct?
Yep. All good.
Fantastic. And if anyone wants to reach out to Larry or I, you can always get to us. If you do a search in Google under #DigitalAircraft, you'll get all kinds of things about the things that we're doing at DigitalAircraft. But in addition to that, you can reach out to Larry Little on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. And we can also be reached by email at mark@digitalaircraft.org. Hey, thanks so much for joining us in this broadcast today. We really want to continue to be enthusiastic and to be able to move forward and accelerate faster and further than we ever have before. And Larry and Klaus, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, thanks, Mark.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it was great to have you guys. Hey, I always close my broadcasts and say fair winds and following seas to you, because I want us all to have fair sailing, and we're going to get there, and we will arrive. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.